Welcome to the highlights of the third game of the World Chess Championship match between Jan Nepomniachtchi from Russia and Ding Liren from China. In the first two games, Jan had dominated and even managed to take the lead by winning the second game. This game is crucial because it will show whether Ding will be able to make a comeback or Jan will be able to further consolidate on his lead. Jan is white, Ding is black. The game started with d4, knight f6, c4, e6. Jan played knight c3. Already this is an important moment of the game because it gives away the information that Jan is ready to face Nimzo Indian Defence, which arises after bishop b4. Well, a lot of players at the top level, they usually do not allow black to play the Nimzo Indian and instead opt for moves like knight f3 or g3 at this point. But after knight c3, black did not play the Nimzo Indian. Instead, he opted for queen's gambit declined. Here, white played another slightly surprising move, that is c takes d5. Well, in the queen's gambit declined, one of the problem pieces for black is the bishop on c8. It is restricted by its own pawn. So why does white play cd5 and allows the bishop a very good diagonal from c8? Well, the reason is, if you have observed the previous game of the same World Championship match, Jan was very successful in activating his c8 bishop. Jan was playing black, and he was very successful in activating his c8 bishop from b7, and after a later dc4, the bishop was very active on this diagonal and was the hero of the game in which he managed to win. So that is one of the reasons why white takes on c5, ruling out future dc4 ideas by black. Well, after ed5, white played the standard move bishop g5, black went pawn to c6, white played e3, and now black played a move which is quite trendy nowadays. He played h6. Well, this particular opening, the Queen's Gambit exchange variation, has been popular for more than 50 years, and most of the players used to play previously bishop e7, and this was the standard way of development. White would play bishop d3, black would castle, white would play queen c2, attacking the h7 pawn. Well, white intends to remove the defender by playing bishop f6 and then capture the h7 pawn. In turn, black reinforces the knight by playing knight bd7. Now he would recapture with the knight. White usually develops his pieces. Black plays rook e8, white castles, and black goes knight f8, supporting his h7 pawn from this square and making way for the c8 bishop to develop. So this is the usual way of development by black in this exchange variation. But nowadays, black players have started playing the move h6 quite often. We shall go through the reasons while going through this game, but this is the trendy move nowadays, and Ding has played this move previously also. White played bishop h4, black played bishop e7, and now bishop d3, castles, and suddenly white played queen c2. Well, you may argue that since there is no pawn on h7, there is no attack on the pawn on h7, why to waste time by playing queen c2? The reason is, had white continued with his normal developing move, like say knight f3 or knight f3 or maybe knight e2. In either case, black would play something like knight e4, equalizing instantly. Here, when white takes bishop e7, black would take back with his queen, reinforcing support on e4. White cannot take e4 because black would capture with the pawn, which is defended by his queen. So that is the reason why white played queen c2 instead. Now knight e4 would simply lose a pawn, because after knight e4, white would capture the bishop, and then he would capture the e4 knight and capture with his queen again. So after this, queen c2, black played rook e8. He continued to develop, and white played knight ge2. Black developed knight bd7. White castled. And now black played a move which I feel is a very deep move. It is a5. What is black doing by playing his move sideways? Well, to understand this move, let us understand this position. Well, in the exchange variation, if you observe very carefully, we have a very interesting imbalance. That is, white has an extra pawn in the center, which black does not have, and black has an extra pawn on c6, which white does not have. So we can conclude that white has a central pawn majority, while black has a queenside pawn majority. In these type of positions, white usually has two plans. The first plan is called minority attack, where white attacks with his pawns on the queen side, where he has pawn minority. He would usually aim to play b4, b5, attacking on the queen side. The logic is, although white has one pawn less on the queen side, it is exactly because of that reason he has an extra file on the queen side. Now this extra file gives him an additional reason to attack black's queen side. So that is the first plan which white usually has in this type of position. And the second plan, you guessed it, it is the majority attack, where white utilizes his extra pawn in the center and goes for attack in the center with his pawns, playing f3, supporting e4 break, and then with his two pawns in the center, he will have a dangerous attacking chances in the center. So these are the two plans which white has, and black has to take measures against both these plans. Now, one of the reasons why the move a5 is such a nice move, it is basically a waiting move by black. It is basically a waiting move by black, where black discourages white from carrying out the minority attack. He discourages white from pushing b4, and at the same time he expands on the queen side where he has pawn majority. And as we shall see, mysteriously, the pawn on a5 or even the flank pawns will have a role in playing against the central attack by white. So a5 move will not only have a role against minority attack, but also against white's central pawn push. Now let's see how the game proceeds. White played a3. Well, basically he also prepares for maybe b4 in future, or sometimes black's he takes away this square from some of the pieces, and as we shall see, it can be a useful move later. Black played knight h5. He gets rid of some of the pieces. As we see, this bishop is less active than this bishop, so black prefers to exchange these pieces. White takes on e7, black takes on e7, and now white has to decide what to do, whether to go for minority attack or to go for majority attack in the center. Now if he plays for minority attack, he has to support his b4 advance by playing rook b1. Now black, one of the variations which can happen is he would bring back his knight from the edge towards the center. White would play b4. After the exchange of the pawns, now one of the ideas of a5 is revealed, that is, the rook on a8 has become active on the queen side, and more importantly, black has an option of preventing white's b5 move. Yes. Okay, so preventing white's b5 move by playing b5 himself. Now many of you may frown that such move leaves the c6 pawn horribly weak. There is no defender. But as it turns out that black can actually play knight b6 and knight c4. Block the c file so that white cannot attack the c6 pawn. And in turn, this b4 pawn is slightly weak because it's a lone pawn which black can attack, and especially black has the useful a file for counterplay. So all these factors considered together, black is having a decent position, and now we realize how useful the move h6 was. Because of h6, this knight is free. It doesn't have to go to f8 always to protect the h7 pawn. Black kept his knight on d7 for some more time, and it has more options. Sometimes it can jump to b6, it may go to f8, or it can go to any other square according to the needs of the position. Well, this was a possible variation which could have happened if white opted for minority attack. Instead, in the game, white went for majority attack. He can't play f3 at once because the e3 pawn is hanging. So first he needed to support the e3 pawn and only then advance f3 and e4. So he plays rook e1. Black played knight f8, making way for the bishop. Even now white can't play f3, so he had to play knight c1, supporting the e pawn with his rook. Black went back knight f6. White played f3 finally, and black played knight e6. Even now he's discouraging the move e4, or rather he's preventing the move e4 because the d4 pawn is without support. So white needs to reinforce the support of d4 pawn. Now he could have played knight b3 with the idea of advancing in the center. But you know what? Now we see how useful the move a5 was, because whenever white will advance e4, black may play a4 attacking this knight, and only after the knight moves, black can once again capture the d4 pawn. So you see, the move a5 was useful in not only stopping the minority attack, but also discouraging majority attack in the center. So it was a very deep move which was prepared by Deng. White did not play knight b3, and one of the most surprising thing is this position has been played by Deng previously, where his opponent had played queen f2, indirectly supporting the d pawn and then advancing e4. In that game, black managed to equalize very comfortably. In this game, Jan Nepomniachtchi played knight e2, well, supporting the d pawn and then preparing e4. Now black played another interesting and thematic move, that is, he played the move c5. Well, the move c5 actually weakens the d pawn, and after the exchange of these pawns, black will have an isolated or a lone pawn in the center. But compared to the other positions of isolated pawn, here even white would have a weak pawn on e3 or slightly undefended pawn on e3. So both this weakness would be cancelled, and you can say the game might turn out to be equal after this move. Well, there was another interesting option for black, that is, he could have gone for b5 at this point. Sorry, instead of this move, he could have gone for b5. Well, once again, you may frown that the c6 pawn is weakened. But once again, black will argue that, okay, I have a one weakness which I can protect with my pieces, but even white has this weakness, and I may use my pawn duo to attack the queen side by advancing b4 and destabilizing white's knight in the center. So this could have been an interesting move, but the move c5 is safer, and I think it is more thematic. White played bishop b5. He tries to make use of the new weakness on b5 square. And now black played a move which speaks of the mindset of the Chinese player. Instead of playing bishop d7, which would have been a safe move, where black might try to equalize, black played rook d8, signaling that he would prefer to keep pieces and is ready for a fight. So that's a good sign for the match, because Ding, it seems, has recovered psychologically from his defeat, and now he is ready to fight back. White played tc5 and created an isolated pawn. Black took on c5. White played queen d2. Now this is another very interesting moment of the match, because here white has the opportunity, black has the opportunity to dissolve his weak pawn by advancing it. And one of the guidelines of playing against isolated pawn or playing with the isolated pawn is that a player who is playing against the isolated pawn, in this case white, should try to prevent his opponent from dissolving the pawn by advancing. So he has to keep a piece on this square and stop the pawn from advancing. But here, black did get this chance of pushing, but he refrained from playing that move and played the move bishop d7 instead. Now, before proceeding further, I would like to say something about isolated pawns. Well, the pawns by themselves are weak because it's a lonely pawn, but the pawn on d5 in these type of situations are useful if they have helpful pieces around. For instance, this pawn supports the square c4 as well as e4 for his pieces. And that is one of the mitigating factors of having isolated pawn. If the player has pieces, he can utilize the outposts or the support points which the isolated pawn provides. And if he does not have pieces, the pawn will remain weak and will be subject to attack. Now black, by refraining from playing d4, once again sends a signal that he is not happy to play equal positions which would arise after the exchange of these pieces. Well, maybe queen d4, and black may take with the queen, and after the exchange of the pieces, it will be almost an equal game, which in general would be fine for black. But Ding says, no, I want to play for something more. he played bishop d7. Now he is planning to exchange the bishops because after bishop d7, he found an exceptional move, that is, he retook the bishop with his knight, apparently losing the d5 pawn. But white cannot capture the pawn with either the queen, because if he takes with the queen, black will take the e3 pawn with his queen and have a good position. And he can neither take with the knight, because black would play something like knight f6. And this knight cannot be supported at all. He can't play e4 because the e pawn is pinned. Black will win a piece after knight b6. So therefore, in this position, white played knight d4. And what was black's big idea behind playing knight d7? He wants to play knight to b6 and gain access to c4 square, which the isolated pawn is supporting. Now we see the advantage of having the isolated pawn. And after knight c4, black will suddenly start attacking. The knight on c4 would be so strong that from here it will put pressure on e3 and attack the a3, b2, all these pawns together. Now, how does white defend against the dangerous idea by black? Now, white also found an ingenious way to defend. It's a very nice concept. He played rook d1, allowing black to play knight c4, and then he moved his queen to f2. Now, at first glance, black can actually capture the a3 pawn with the idea that when white captures the knight, black will also capture the knight and win a pawn. But there's a trick. After knight a3, white had planned the beautiful move e4, attacking the d5 pawn and taking back the pawn, recovering the pawn, but a more useful pawn than the a3 pawn. White would have an advantage. And the point behind this move is, if black takes de4, white will take back with the knight, and now the knight, which was vulnerable on c3, has disappeared. He is attacking the queen, and he will take back the black knight the next move. So white would win a piece if black is careless. So therefore, e4 move would give white some advantage. So with this idea, basically white defends on the queen side. Black played rook ac8, white played knight a4, moving away from possible knight a3 ideas. Now black moved queen e7. He could have gone queen a7, but then probably he was afraid of white having something on the king side. The queen is very far from defense, and white may try to achieve something with his knight. Knight e7 check is threatened, and knight can also sometimes look for attacks on h6 or g7. So black preferred the move queen to e7, after which white played rook to e1. He centralized his piece. Black went queen f6. He activated his queen, and in some positions he is even planning to exchange on d4. If you look at the position carefully, both sides have two knights. Black's knight on c4 is actually more active than its counterpart on a4, while white's knight on d4 is slightly more active than its counterpart on e6. So white wants to preserve his d4 knight. He played knight b5, and black tried to exchange the knight by playing knight c7. So it is over here both the sides decided to repeat the moves. White played knight d4 again, and black again insisted he wanted to exchange that knight. And the players repeated moves. They played this move 3 times, and the game was drawn according to the rules of chess. Now it was a game which Superficially looks like a boring game, nothing much happened, but it did reveal lots of ideas which both players had in their preparations, and as well as psychologically, Ding has basically overcome his upset, his loss. The frame of mind has improved, and now I feel that we will be having a much more lively games and lively world championship matches in future. So that's all from my side today. We shall be meeting again in the highlights of the fourth game of the World Chess Championship match. Thank you and thanks for watching.